we got some rather surprising news. Oklahoma and Texas will not be renewing their media rights contracts. That expires in the summer of 2025. And the expectation is that they'll both be heading to the SEC. I want to talk about the ESPN thing, but before we do that, do you have any reactions to this move from the bat?
No, I mean, it doesn't surprise me really, but my reaction is that it's it seems to be what's happening in a lot of sports. I mean, you talk about the Super League in soccer that was really close to happening. This feels a lot like it, where teams are trying to find a way to get the most revenue, and Texas and Oklahoma merging into what could be the SEC is probably the best way for them to do that. And I'm not surprised by that at all. And I mean, we saw what they're meeting with the Big 12, that it looks like they're not going to renew their agreement, like you said. So if they enter the SEC, that really helps them financially. It's going to help all the teams in the SEC financially. But what it will do is it will help the Big 12, and then it's going to hurt the surrounding conferences, because what if a team like Clemson in the ACC or Oregon in the Pac-12, are those teams going to be now, oh, what's Texas and Oklahoma doing? They're going to go and join this SEC. What if we make our own moves to join this conference? And then, like I said, a Super League emerges. So I think this is just a small step of what could be really bad for college football, because the small conferences, I think, are what makes it so special. And it's not one league, really. It's a lot of small leagues. It's not a professional sports league. So for me, that's what it's going to lead to. And that's the scariest thing.
Yeah, I agree that this move definitely stings for the Big 12, but there are broader implications here. And I'm just curious to see how teams or leagues like the ACC will respond to this, and now we're hearing that the Big 12 is filing a cease and desist against ESPN. And I'm not really sure how to decipher this news. They're allegedly in contact with the remaining 8 teams in the Big 12. But is this just part of that step to what you're mentioning, Mike?
Well, I mean, it makes sense that the network that broadcasts games would want the 2 of the best teams in the Big 12 to join the SEC. I think that's obviously more profitable, because the more games you have between the best teams, the more money you're going to make. If Texas plays Alabama now and Oklahoma plays Auburn, like, that's going to make more money. So it really does make sense that that's going to help the TV viewership and everything, but it's not going to help the smaller schools. It's not going to help the conferences. And like I said earlier, if these schools from other conferences like Clemson, the ACC, and like I said, Oregon, the Pac-12, teams that usually dominate their conference, now if they say, let's all join this one conference in the SEC, that's going to help all those teams in the SEC make more money, because they're playing higher viewed games and bigger schedules. But it's not going to help those teams in the Pac-12 and the ACC that are probably lower. And we're not even there yet. Right now, we're just with the Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12, but that's what we could be heading in. That's the direction we could go in. So if I'm the NCAA, I'm not sure if they have the power to find a way to prevent this, but it does seem like college sports are becoming more and more monetized, especially with the latest thing with athletes being able to make money and generate money as athletes do endorsements. It does seem like there's a trend of college sports becoming more money centered. And although the athletes thing has a lot of positives to it, there's also this thing with Texas and Oklahoma trying to join the SEC in the near future that really could be detrimental to the sport.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point when you talk about the money, because some fans, just of football in general, or you can name other sports too, basketball, aren't necessarily fans of NBA teams because of the money situation. And I think that programs within college sports are so big precisely because of that. And now when teams are, going here, going there, because athletes can now be paid, I think a little bit of that, you lose that element of college sports where it's untouched by the dollar signs. And I guess speaking to that, do you think that these Oklahoma and Texas teams are good enough to compete in the SEC? Because they've definitely benefited a little bit from being like that big fish, small pond. Not that the Big 12 is a bad conference, but SEC football is as good as it gets. Do you think that either of these two teams are going to regret this?
Yeah. I mean, I think Oklahoma is really the only team that can maybe really still pursue a national championship if they're in the SEC. They would be among the likes of Texas A&M and like Auburn and maybe like Tennessee, but they would still have a trouble against Alabama. And I think their record would suffer for it, even though they make more money. And my quick fix that I really just thought of now would, if you expand the teams in the NCAA football system and you make it so if you win your conference, you get an automatic bid, then a team like Texas and Oklahoma would not want to leave. You know, if they can win the Big 12, which is a much easier conference, and they get an automatic bid, then why leave? So I think if NCAA or college football really wanted to do something to keep this from happening, then this is the move. Because then if the Oregon leaving the Pac-12 will never even happen because they can win the Pac-12 and get an automatic bid. And the same thing with Clemson in the ACC. So I think that could be a real next step that could happen. And this is going to avoid the super teams. And it's going to be really interesting because you're going to want to watch more Pac-12 games now because that winner's automatically going to be in the national championship. And even if it turns into a 6-team or 8-team national championship with the 6th team and the top 2 get a bye, or the 8-team where it's single elimination, 1 plays 8, I think that could be a way to stop this from happening. And I think they're trending in that direction anyway. But if you have it so the Big 12 winner automatically gets in, Texas and Oklahoma are not going to want to leave because winning that conference is relatively easy for them compared to going the SEC and having to fight your way through Auburn, Alabama, Texas A&M, Georgia. I mean, that's a lot harder. So if college football wants to fix this, this seems like the easy solution to me.
Mike, we should have you as the head of the NCAA. We got to have you making these decisions.
Sign me up.